The airport buzzed with restless energy, the kind that only lingers in places where countless stories overlap, reunions, goodbyes, new beginnings. Among the sea of hurried travelers, Emily clutched her daughter's tiny hand, her other arm weighed down by a worn duffel bag that carried more burdens than belongings. She wasn't going on vacation, nor was she flying for work. Emily was a single mom, struggling paycheck to paycheck, working double shifts at a diner just to keep food on the table. Her journey today wasn't glamorous, it was necessity. She had scraped together enough money for a flight to a new city, chasing yet another chance at a stable life. But as she waited in the long line, exhaustion painted heavy shadows under her eyes. Life had been cruelly relentless since her ex-husband left, leaving her with debts and a daughter to raise alone. And though Emily fought fiercely every day, there were moments, like this one, where hope felt impossibly fragile. She sighed, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and forced a smile for her little girl, who was bubbling with innocent excitement at the sight of airplanes. Emily didn't know it yet, but this ordinary day at the airport was about to collide with a past she thought she'd buried years ago, a past wrapped in laughter, young dreams, and a boy who once made her believe in forever. And now, without warning, that boy, grown into a man with power, wealth, and a heart Emily still remembered too well, was about to step back into her story at the exact moment she needed him most. Emily's daughter tugged on her sleeve, pointing toward a tall man striding through the terminal with an entourage of suited assistants trailing behind. He looked like someone important, the kind of person who owned time instead of chasing it. Emily's eyes followed out of idle curiosity, until her breath caught in her throat. The sharp jawline, the confident stride, the familiar spark in his gaze despite the years, it couldn't be. Her heart stuttered as recognition slammed into her. Daniel Carter. Her first love. The boy who used to walk her home after school, who whispered promises under the stars, who left for college with dreams too big for their small town. Emily hadn't seen him in over a decade, and now here he was, no longer the lanky dreamer she once knew but a man radiating authority and success. She overheard the murmurs, CEO of Carter Enterprises, worth millions, one of the youngest self-made businessmen in the country. A lump rose in her throat. She tugged her daughter closer, instinctively trying to disappear into the crowd, because what could she possibly say to him now? She was a worn-out waitress with overdue bills and a child to protect. He was a millionaire CEO, polished and untouchable. And yet, as fate would have it, Daniel's eyes swept across the crowded terminal and locked onto hers. The world seemed to pause, the noise fading to a dull hum. His confident stride faltered, replaced by something softer, shock, recognition, and something else Emily couldn't name. Her heart pounded wildly as she tried to look away, but Daniel had already started moving toward her, closing the years-long distance one step at a time. Emily's pulse quickened, every instinct urging her to retreat, but her feet felt anchored to the floor. Her daughter, unaware of the storm inside her mother, tilted her head curiously at the man approaching. "Mommy, do you know him?" she asked, her voice bright and innocent. Emily swallowed hard, unsure of how to answer. By the time she found the courage to respond, Daniel was already standing before them. For a moment, he didn't speak, he simply looked at her, as though confirming she was real and not just a memory from a lifetime ago. Then, with a smile that hadn't lost its warmth despite the years, he said softly, "Emily." Hearing her name on his lips again made something ache deep inside her chest. "Daniel," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. His gaze flicked to the little girl hiding shyly behind her, curiosity sparking in his eyes. Emily quickly rested a hand on her daughter's shoulder, protective and hesitant. The years had carved vast differences between their worlds, and she felt painfully aware of every threadbare detail about herself, the scuffed shoes, the faded sweater, the tired lines on her face. But Daniel didn't seem to see any of that. Instead, he looked at her as if time had folded back, as if he still remembered the girl who once dreamed of forever with him. "It's been a long time," he said gently. "Too long." Emily forced a small smile, her heart waging war between nostalgia and the raw reminder of how different their lives had become. She had once been his equal in dreams. Now, she felt like a ghost standing in the shadow of a man who had conquered the world. Daniel's assistants hovered a few steps away, clearly puzzled why their boss had paused mid-stride in such a public place. But Daniel waved them off with a simple gesture, his focus entirely on Emily. "Are you traveling somewhere?" he asked, his tone casual but his eyes searching hers for answers she wasn't ready to give. Emily shifted uncomfortably, gripping her daughter's hand tighter. "Just, trying to start fresh," she said, forcing a polite smile. Daniel noticed the weariness behind her words, the unspoken weight she carried in her slumped shoulders. His eyes softened, and in that moment, the powerful CEO seemed to melt back into the boy who once swore he'd always protect her. Before Emily could say more, her daughter piped up, "Mommy, is he your friend?" The question made Daniel smile, a genuine warmth spreading across his face. He crouched slightly to meet the little girl's eyes. "I used to be," he said kindly, "a very good friend." The child giggled, charmed by his gentle tone, and Emily's heart twisted. She hadn't expected this reunion, not here, not now. Life had hardened her to surprises, and yet this one unraveled something tender she thought she'd buried forever. Still, embarrassment nipped at her. She wanted to shrink, to hide the truth of her struggles before he noticed too much. Daniel seemed to sense her discomfort, so he stood back up, his expression calm but intent. "Emily," he said softly, "maybe we could catch up. Just for a moment. I'd really like that." His sincerity rattled her more than his success ever could. She hesitated, torn between pride and longing, but deep down she knew this was not coincidence, it was fate knocking on her door. Emily hesitated, her heart pounding as she glanced at the departure board overhead. Every second felt like a tug-of-war between survival and vulnerability. She wasn't sure she had the strength to let Daniel back into her life, not when she was barely holding it together. But then she saw her daughter's curious eyes studying both of them, innocent and hopeful, and something inside her softened. Just for a moment, she agreed quietly. Daniel's smile was immediate, almost boyish, and he guided them toward a quiet corner of the terminal cafe. They sat across from one another, the years between them collapsing with every shared glance. "You look stronger," he said after a pause, his voice low, as if he were afraid of saying the wrong thing. Emily let out a soft laugh, not bitter, but tired. "Life makes you strong when it doesn't give you a choice." Daniel nodded slowly, his expression turning thoughtful. He wanted to ask questions: where had she been, what had happened, why was she here now, but he held back, sensing the fragility of her defenses. Instead, he shifted the conversation to her daughter, asking her name, her favorite things, letting the little girl's laughter fill the heavy spaces between them. Emily watched quietly, a knot forming in her throat. For a fleeting moment, it was as if she was looking at a version of life she'd once imagined, a family, laughter, security. Yet the reality of her circumstances pressed down harder than ever. She couldn't let herself get lost in nostalgia. Not when her world was built on survival. And yet, deep down, something told her this encounter wasn't just chance. Maybe it was the universe offering her one more lifeline. Daniel leaned back slightly, studying Emily with an intensity that made her shift uncomfortably in her chair. "You don't have to tell me everything," he said gently, "but I can see you're carrying more than you should alone." His words pierced through her carefully built walls. She opened her mouth to deny it, to insist she was fine, but the truth ached too loudly to ignore. Emily stared down at her hands, fingers tightening around the coffee cup. "I've been managing," she whispered. "It hasn't been easy. But she's my reason," she added, nodding toward her daughter, who was happily coloring on a napkin. Daniel followed her gaze, his expression softening. "She's lucky to have you," he said. Emily blinked quickly, trying to hold back tears. It had been so long since anyone had said those words to her. Most people only saw her struggles, her failures, her tiredness. But here was Daniel, seeing her strength. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with a reminder, rent overdue, another bill looming. The weight of reality crushed her fleeting sense of comfort. She stood abruptly, forcing a smile. "We should go. Our flight won't wait." Daniel rose too, hesitation in his movements, as though he didn't want the moment to end. "Emily," he said carefully, "if you ever need anything, please know I want to help." His tone was sincere, not pitying, but Emily's pride flared. She shook her head gently. "Thank you, but we'll be okay. We always are." She turned to leave, her daughter skipping happily beside her. But as she walked away, Daniel's chest tightened with a sudden, undeniable certainty. He wasn't about to let her slip away again. Not this time. Emily and her daughter made their way toward the gate, but her mind was spinning. Seeing Daniel again had stirred emotions she thought were long buried, hope, fear, and the ache of unfinished stories. She gripped her daughter's hand tighter, reminding herself that dreams belonged to the past. Survival was her present. But just as the boarding line began to form, she heard hurried footsteps behind her. "Emily, wait." Daniel's voice cut through the noise of the terminal. She froze, her heart thundering as he caught up. He looked slightly out of breath, uncharacteristic for the poised CEO she had just seen. "Please," he said, lowering his voice, "don't go without giving me a chance to do something. I can't explain it, but seeing you again, it feels like fate." Emily shook her head, her voice trembling. "Daniel, our lives are too different. I can't let you step into my chaos." He studied her with steady determination. "You think I care about differences? Emily, I built everything I have today from nothing. I know what struggle looks like. And I know what love looks like, too. I don't want to lose either, especially not you." The words hit her like a tidal wave, but walls of pride and fear still held firm. "I don't need saving," she whispered. Daniel leaned closer, his gaze unwavering. "I'm not trying to save you. I just want to stand beside you." For the first time in years, Emily felt the smallest flicker of safety, of possibility. Still, the gate agent's voice boomed over the intercom, calling passengers to board, forcing her to make a choice that could change everything. Emily's chest tightened as the boarding line moved forward, passengers shuffling past with weary faces and heavy bags. Her daughter tugged on her hand, whispering, "Mommy, can we stay with your friend? He's nice." The innocence in her voice nearly shattered Emily's resolve. She glanced at Daniel, standing there with an intensity in his eyes that felt both terrifying and comforting. "You don't understand," she murmured, her voice breaking. "I can't risk dragging anyone into this. I'm barely holding us together." Daniel took a small step closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Emily, you don't have to do it alone anymore. Let me help, not because I pity you, but because I still care. I never stopped." His words were a key turning in a lock she'd kept bolted for years. Memories rushed back, the boy who stayed up late tutoring her, who carried her books when she sprained her ankle, who once promised her the world under a blanket of stars. She thought time had erased that love, but here it was, alive in his eyes. Emily's throat ached with unshed tears. Her instinct screamed to run, to keep her walls high, but her heart whispered something different. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to let someone in again. The gate agent called for final boarding, urgency slicing through the fragile moment. Emily's daughter looked up at her expectantly, as if trusting her mother to choose the path that would finally lead them home, not just to a new city, but to a life filled with more than struggle. Emily exhaled shakily, realizing the decision wasn't just about her anymore. The line for boarding grew shorter, each passenger disappearing down the jet bridge until Emily stood at the edge of two futures. She could step forward, disappear into another city, another cycle of scraping by, or she could turn around and take the terrifying risk of letting someone back into her fragile world. Her daughter tugged again, eyes wide with innocence. "Mommy, I like him. He makes you smile." Emily's chest tightened. When was the last time her little girl had seen her smile without effort? Slowly, she turned to Daniel. He stood rooted, not with the arrogance of a CEO used to control, but with the quiet desperation of a man afraid of losing something irreplaceable. "Daniel," she whispered, tears finally spilling over, "I don't have anything to give you. No money, no time, no pieces of a perfect life. Just, me. And her." Daniel's jaw tightened, and then he stepped forward, his hand gently brushing a tear from her cheek. "That's all I've ever wanted, Emily. You and her. The rest doesn't matter." The sincerity in his voice cracked something deep inside her, breaking years of loneliness and self-doubt. For the first time in forever, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel invisible. She felt seen, truly seen. The gate agent's final call echoed behind them, but Emily no longer heard it. Instead, she heard her daughter's laughter as Daniel knelt down, promising softly, "I'll be here. Always." Emily's trembling hand reached out, choosing not the easier path, but the braver one. She placed her hand in Daniel's, and in that moment, she knew she wasn't walking alone anymore. The boarding gate closed behind the last passenger, but Emily didn't move. For the first time in years, she wasn't chasing escape, she was choosing a future. Daniel guided her and her daughter to a nearby bench, his hand steady around hers, as if anchoring her in a storm that had raged too long. Emily looked at her daughter, who beamed as though she instinctively understood that something precious was unfolding. "You're not alone anymore," Daniel whispered, his tone firm yet tender. "Whatever battles you've fought, whatever mountains are still ahead, we'll face them together." The words wrapped around her like a warm blanket, dissolving layers of fear she hadn't realized she still carried. Emily thought about the years of struggle, the nights of skipped meals so her daughter could eat, the exhaustion of working shifts that blurred into dawn, the quiet tears shed in silence. And now, against all odds, life had given her this, an old love returned not to rescue her, but to walk beside her. Emily squeezed his hand, her voice trembling but steady. "I don't know what tomorrow looks like, Daniel. But for the first time, I'm not afraid to find out." Daniel smiled, his eyes glistening, and reached for her daughter's tiny hand. Together, they stood, a new chapter waiting beyond the terminal's glass windows. The world outside still carried its hardships, its uncertainties, but Emily no longer faced it alone. As they walked out of the airport into the golden wash of afternoon light, she realized something profound. Sometimes the universe doesn't give second chances, it gives new beginnings. And this one, built on love, hope, and courage, was theirs to write together.